I felt like I've won the lottery in later life. But with that goes a sense of responsibility and a fresh sense of purpose. There's always someone with a bigger boat, Ian. There's always someone with a bigger cock.
The trader that made a billion in a day. And so what's that? He said, enough.
Well, that's a profound statement, isn't it? The coming wave about AI. It's not controllable. It's not predictable. And you can't really regulate it. I just want to give younger people permission to be great and permission to find financial security for life.
How much money is enough? It's the question most of us spend our lives chasing, yet very few ever actually stop to ask what wealth is actually for. Is it security, freedom, more time with the people we love? Or have we confused building a successful life with building a meaningful one? Well, my guest today is serial entrepreneur and investor Gary Ashworth. So let's get into it. You're at a time in your life where life has taken you by surprise.
It has done. You're right, Ian. Absolutely.
Yeah. And obviously something that wasn't planned. And this is really what this show is all about. It's about, you can't control everything that happens outside of your control, your locus of control, but what you can do is react in a positive way and take the ball by the horns from that point onwards. So for you, what's unsettled you in a good way at your time of life now?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, I was on vacation a year and a half ago, and my wife, who's younger than me, she's 47 and never been pregnant in her life, just suddenly said, well, darling, my shorts are a little bit tight. This was in the middle of the night, so we just jumped in an all-night, a taxi to an all-night chemist, came back, and sure enough, she was pregnant. And there were some odd thoughts going through both of our heads at the time. I've got two grown-up children in their early 30s. I've come to the conclusion now, I was sitting in the playpen last week, and I just thought I've won the lottery. I felt like I've won the lottery in later life. But with that goes a sense of responsibility and a fresh sense of purpose, because you think, well, perhaps I shouldn't open another bottle of wine at 11:30 in the morning. Perhaps I'd quite like to be around to walk my daughter down the aisle in however many years, if that's what she chooses to do. And I think it does redefine what you're doing. And it wasn't something that was planned or I'd thought about. Miracles happen and good things happen and bad things happen, but you just can't necessarily see them. Fortunately, there have been some awful things that have happened, but that was one of the great ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said there, and you mentioned earlier, that it's now giving you a renewed sense of what this next chapter of life could be and what you would now do about that. Because maybe the plans have changed and you're looking at things in a longer view and you're thinking about what you might need to do to actually be able to be here, enjoy it, and actually be purposefully a part of your daughter's life.
I think that's right too. And I think, like many entrepreneurs, I spent the first half of my life sacrificing any kind of thoughts on health to build wealth, to build some security, because you think, let's build a safe nest for my family to be safe and secure in. And then halfway through your career, you're going, hang on a minute. Now I'm going to sacrifice my wealth to try and be healthy in the other half of my life. And actually, the balance is really to try and blend the two. But I think that's hard to do for entrepreneurs, because it's very hard to set the temperature to the right heat setting. It's like being in a shower where you got one of those knobs that you can't quite get right.
Yeah.
And I think it's very difficult to set that temperature, because events happen, don't they? Business gets hard, or there's a takeover, or somebody leaves, and you have no option but to act. And that can cause anxiety when you weren't necessarily hoping for it that particular week.
If you look back on sort of where you came from to where you are, in terms of not only, it's very easy, I think, sometimes to look back and go, the story arc, if you like. But if you kind of go back to a time where life was not as it was now, you don't have the same lens, you don't have the same experiences. Why do you think it is that first part of, I must make more money at all costs? Like, what is the more? What are you chasing at that point? What is the wealth? Is it purely security? Is it a ring fence? Or is it also a sort of a self-drive to keep?
I think with me, it's security. And if you look back, and I had a really happy childhood and a really happy upbringing, but it started from being adopted at 6 weeks old. And I had fabulous parents, but I think if you put me on the psychiatrist chair and hypnotize me, there is a little bit of insecurity that's come from there.
Right.
And I think I've tried to build a nest and some safety around that. And actually what I have learned about creating some kind of wealth, and I'm not the wealthiest guy in the world, not the wealthiest guy in this building probably, but it does take away some of the worry and some of the anxiety. And anxiety is a great killer, isn't it? Stress is a terrible killer, and wealth does take away some of that, because you don't have to worry about whether you've got a job or not, or whether you can afford to pay your rent or your mortgage, and it takes away that aspect of your life. So I think it helps in that way. So I can't speak for everybody else, but I think certainly insecurity was one of the drivers for me.
And from your perspective, because everybody's different and everyone sort of has their ideas of it, and I know it sounds really, really rudimentary, but I think it's really important for people to get this, because money, wealth, if we strip wealth away, just have money itself as a word, it's a loaded word. Some people have it as a negative, some people have it as a positive, and some people are indifferent in between. Define it. It's a currency, obviously, but what does it do? What does it give you?
I think it gives you different things in different times of your life, and it gives you different things whether you have it or you don't have it. So for me, as an immature young man growing up in sort of Thatcher's Britain in the 80s, having money was about buying things. It was about having a nice watch and a nice car. And then when I grew a little bit older, I think it was about buying time, time to do what you want to do, time to spend time with the people that you want to and the people that you love. So it became very much focused on time. And then the older you get, I think, and the more complex the world gets, it's the top of the pyramid. It's about finding peace. And I think that's what money isn't the only way to the top of the pyramid, but I think it's one way that you can try and find a less stressful life. Isn't there an old Chinese proverb that I didn't ever understand that said, "May you live in uninteresting times," and it's supposed to be a blessing? And in my own life, I don't want to live in uninteresting times. And just every now and again, I think, I'd quite like to live in an uninteresting. Let me have an uninteresting week this week.
For a while.
Yeah, just this week.
Yeah,
it would. You turn the telly on. Let it be uninteresting.
Yeah, that would be nice. But it takes away the strive, doesn't it?
It can do. Yeah, I think it can do. I'm not trying to push this book that I wrote last year, but I asked 50 entrepreneurs an interesting question, which was, how much is enough? How much is enough for you? Yep. And I asked all sorts of people at different stages of wealth creation. And the general answer was actually really upsetting, because what most people said was, unsurprisingly, was just a little bit more than I've got now.
Right, okay.
Just a little bit more than I've got now. And actually, if you think about that, that's a terrible answer.
It really is.
What everybody's saying is, I'll never be happy.
Yeah.
Because whatever I achieve, I'll move the goalpost a little bit, and I want just a little bit more. And as I rudely said in a post the other day that got cancelled, was, there's always someone with a bigger boat, Ian. There's always someone with a bigger cock.
Yeah.
I think you need to define what enough is.
Yes.
And be happy when you achieve that goal.
Yeah.
Don't just keep moving the goalpost the whole time.
Yeah, very, very, very true. I think it was in Morgan Housel's book, The Art of Money, and he talks about a situation at a dinner party where the outcome is basically, I'll have something that he'll never have, talking about the trader that made a billion in a day. And so what's that? He said, enough. Well,
that's a profound statement, isn't it?
Yeah. And it is true. I think we're all guilty of it in 2026, whether it's specifically money, whether it's fame of some kind, whether it's whatever it is, we're all chasing stuff, shiny objects of some kind or another. But if you don't know why you're doing it, it kind of defeats the object, doesn't it?
I think it's worse than that, actually. It's social media. It's not just youth culture demand instant gratification. We all want instant gratification. And we see this kind of falseness on our phones and our tablets about what bullshit lives some people have. I mean, bless the Kardashians, but perhaps they've got quite a lot to answer for, really, because everybody's saying you can have it all now. Amazon will deliver it tomorrow. Somebody will lend you the money to buy it. And we just think we should have instant gratification. I saw a post that Jimmy Carr did the other day, and he said, we're not grateful for anything anymore. And actually, it's only in the last 50 years that we've had a hot shower. You know, before then we had baths, and before that there were kind of tubs that people filled up with hot water. My grandma used to fill a tub up with hot water, and I remember it being hung up on the wall. But we actually should be pretty grateful for a lot of the wonderful stuff that we've got. But I don't know anybody who sits in the shower in the morning, oh, this is fantastic. Wow. But actually, perhaps we should be.
100%. I mean, you know, if you were out in the wilderness for a week and you hadn't really washed and you hadn't really eaten properly and you expend a lot of energy, the first proper meal you have, it could be the plainest, awfulest meal normally you wouldn't touch. It will be the best meal you've ever had.
Yeah. Even a Ginster's pie might
absolutely,
be
yeah, absolutely.
From the petrol station.
And you're so right. We've lost that gratitude piece. I grew up at a time where we still had outdoor toilets. So for the first probably 10 years of my life, if you wanted to go to the toilet in the middle of the night, you learned you didn't because you didn't want to go outside to the toilet.
That's true.
Now you speak to some people who are like, what? That's crazy. But it's just how life was. So if you've grown up in the last, say, 20 years, you've seen that technology curve really ramp up really, really quickly. And I think that hasn't helped. People are less patient, for sure. But in terms of entrepreneurship, I mean, it's interesting what you said. People think you can have it all. Has that been your experience at one time or another? Or does it change? Do you have to put your life out of balance in one way to achieve something and then redress the balance later on?
I think you need to give yourself a good talking to and work out what have it all means. Have it all in terms of friends, have it all in terms of family, have it all in terms of wealth. I think Stephen Covey in his book, The 7 Habits, was saying, if at your funeral you've got someone from your work saying he was a great guy, and someone from your family saying what a fantastic person this was, and someone from the community saying this guy's done a great job for the community, then maybe you've got it kind of right, really. But if you're setting the wrong goals, then clearly you'll be disappointed if you achieve them.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I think one thing that, we sort of touched on, I think before we were recording, but there is a difference in terms of mindset between an entrepreneur and someone who's not entrepreneurial. I've encountered this quite often. And it's not necessarily that they actually think differently, but one thinks they don't or can't think differently. Have you encountered that? What's your take on that? And the reason I ask as well, by the way, is because one seems to feel like they have more control over their destiny, and the other seems to feel like things are happening to them, not for them.
Let me just pause a second and think before I answer glibly. In the experience of quite a lot of people that I've met, I may be wrong, but I think that entrepreneurs tend to set a goal and then chunk it down and work backwards. Mm-hmm. I even wrote a book about this a little while ago called Eat the Pudding First. Begin with the end in mind and work backwards. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs set these goals, and a lot of other people who aren't perhaps so entrepreneurial will just see where life takes them. And their goal is to have a slightly better year this year than they had last year. But as someone far cleverer than I said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Mm. And so, they let life wash over them a little bit. Whereas people that seem to be more focused on a goal, could be a sports goal, could be a health goal, could be a weight loss goal, could be a business growing goal, and commit to the goals and write them down and monitor them, or perhaps have somebody else who's helping check in on them, or a coach. I know you did some coaching, and a lot of business people have coaches as well. And it's hard to think that anybody could win a gold medal now without having a coach. So my answer would be a lot of it is goal oriented. And sometimes it's hard to have goals because you've got to get up early in the morning. Means you've got to do things that you might not want to do because it's hard. And that comes back to this kind of instant gratification. In my experience, perhaps I've just not been a lottery winner or been lucky. It's pretty hard to run businesses, and they go wrong. You have to fix them, and you have to be tenacious and patient. And in my experience, it's not the goal that's wrong, but the time period you associate with it is often wrong. Seems everything in my life I do takes longer. If I build a new garden shed, it takes twice as long and costs 3 times as much. It just seems to me that things take longer than you think.
Yeah.
And some people are prepared to put in the graft, and some aren't.
You've got the goal setting, as you said, and then there's obviously the patience piece as well, because some people do, have loose goals. But do you think it's the idea and the ability to hold that goal above all else and actually just know that you're going to get there because you're not going to give up, not because you know fundamentally that that's going to happen, but you're not going to allow it to not happen?
I think the clever thing actually is to hold the big goal in one part of your head, your brain, or wherever it lives, but also have the ability to see these manageable bite-sized chunks. I think this is probably a bit NLP-like by now, because if the goal seems too hard, if the goal is, I'm just going to climb Everest next week, actually that's too hard. Or if I'm going to lose 5 stone, you've got to cut things down into bite-sized chunks, but still be able to hold the big goal in your head, so you know what you're achieving when you're getting up on a rainy Tuesday to train, or you're coming in early to try and outpace your competitors at work. I think it's the ability to hold these short-term goals and the big goal at the same time, and not everyone can do that.
No. And that seems to be the big difference, doesn't it, in terms of sort of the trajectory of life for a lot of people. You can kind of see, as you said, there's a lot of people and this isn't wrong, this isn't a criticism, this is just an observation more than anything else. Some people will meander along.
Some people might be happier meandering along.
Absolutely. And this was something I was going to ask you in your experience. If you had that, have you come across people who genuinely, if you tried to change their nature and make them more goal-orientated, that actually it would probably make them unhappier in some way?
Well, again, I think it depends what's driving their outcomes. My dad was a big kind of influence in my life. I think a lot of boys want to impress their dad, really. And he said 2 things to me. Neither of them were particularly pleasant, actually, but they were good lessons for me. The first one was a horrible thing he said when I was 16 and flunked my O-levels. And he said, "We'll always love you, son, even though you'll never amount to anything." Now, that's hard, and I can't ask him now because he's passed away whether he was actually serious about that or whether he was just trying to give me a kick up the pants. But the other thing he said, when I did start to be obsessively quite exceptional in business, he said, "Gary, make sure you smell the roses along the way." And I think for all of us, sometimes we forget about the journey and then just focus on the destination, if that doesn't sound too corny. I know it's been spoken about a lot, but I need to remind myself sometimes the journey is so important.
Yeah.
If you get there, but you hate all the years that it's taken to do that, that's not a great goal, is it?
No. I mean, from your perspective, which is unique to you and what you've done, when you look back, do you feel like you had that perspective enough, or was that something that, I'm not going to say regrets because I don't believe in regrets, but would that be something that you would augment along the way and put more into?
I would have done things differently. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I can think of a decade when I was just a busy fool running around doing stuff that didn't have much of an outcome, really. It's one of those things, don't have regrets. But a different question would be, would you have done things differently had you had your time again? Yeah, I think most people would. I certainly would.
Why do you think it wasn't the case at the time?
I think you kind of just get caught up in the moment, and you get caught up in what you've told yourself and what you've told other people. And I think it's a good question you've asked, because I think one of the challenges that successful people have is not knowing when to give up, because we're told, don't give up, keep going, and we hear examples and see examples of rugby teams that never check out before the 80th minute or the 90th minute if it's a football match, and you see people winning in the 8th minute of extra time.
Yeah, true.
But actually, there does come a time, if you've given it a good shot, when, if you're riding a dead horse, get off. But it's quite hard to know whether you've given it enough or not. And it's not something that I've learned yet. There are some things that I've just kept on going, flogging. I should have given up years ago. And then the other things, you never wonder if you'd carried on going, whether you'd have been successful or not.
Yeah, of course. And that could obviously extend to business, relationships, all facets of life, right?
Absolutely. Should you give your relationship another try, or if you've been getting the same unhappiness for 10 years, is that enough? When's enough? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a tough one. I think a lot of people, especially people who have kind of set out goals for success and they've measured what they want, and they kind of have this idea of, I'm going to be happier when, but I'm going to work towards it. If you speak to a lot of successful people, they have lost people along the way. Those relationships, some of those that they had at the beginning, they didn't survive the course. Whether they were friends, family, even partners. Is that something you've experienced, or is that kind of not really your journey?
No, I've made terrible mistakes, and I'm not the guy to ask for relationship advice. It's taken me, a long time to get to the happy position that I'm in now. And I think when you are driven, sometimes it's hard to get into second position and see life through other people's eyes. And so, there've been partners I've had or CEOs I've had at work where I've been furious about something that they've done. I thought, oh my God, they're terrible. They've got to go. Get rid of them. Sack them. They've got to go. And then you sack another one. Oh, they're terrible. Sack them. And by the time you think the third one, hang on, is it all them? Or could it be a bit of me?
Yeah.
And then you think, oh, actually, probably was a little bit of me. Actually, it probably was half me. Oh, actually, it might have been my fault, not their fault. So yes, I have lost people along the way.
Yeah.
But the biggest crime, I guess, is not learning, from that, just making the same mistake. You meet people, don't you? Say, I've had 30 years experience. No, you haven't. Yeah. You've had 1 year's experience and you've repeated it 29 times.
Very true. Very, very true. So looking back from your let's say your work perspective of your life, what's been the biggest successes and why?
I hate the word lucky, but sometimes you are in the right place at the right time. And also, I started my first business when I was 21, and people say, oh, Gary, that was brave of you, wasn't it? No, it was easy to set up a business when you're 21 because you don't really have any responsibilities. If you have a mortgage or, fees to pay for children, whether in private school or not, you've got fees to pay for children,
of course,
and a responsibility to look after them, then it's harder to give up your day job and go all in and set up your own business. So I think one of the things that I did right was set up early when I didn't have very much responsibility. And also I've learned that optimism seems to be a trait of slightly younger people, because when you get older and you get a bit more wisdom, I think you get a bit more cynical. And I wish I wasn't as cynical as I am in some ways, but I was much more optimistic and much more gung-ho when I was younger. So that business went on to float on the stock market, and we eventually sold it for 10 times the float price. And that was a good and a bad thing, actually, because I think the success of that went to my head.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I can do anything.
Sure.
I'm great at this. It's just about managing people. So then I did, with a friend, a rescue rights issue for a public company, a restaurant chain. And it was a disaster. I don't know anything about restaurants. Do you think I was Gordon Ramsay or something? I should never have done that. And consequently, the outcome wasn't great. And the lesson there again was, stick to what you know. So when I look back, I've had some great successes. I started a business 2 years ago that I've been building up for 20 years. And there's a good story there and there's a bad story. The good story is that I sold it, and it was great, and people were happy to go with their new owner. But the bad news was, had I sold it 10 years before, it would have been worth 18 million quid more. So I left 18 million quid on the table. You have a good knack of bringing out things in people, Ian, don't you? I know.
It's curiosity.
I'm not telling everybody that story. I'm slightly embarrassed by it.
But I think it's important though, because you are at a point where you're happy to share, because all right, I'm not saying that you would share with everyone everything that you've done, but there's so much to learn.
Well, I think there's a big difference. We're in a really interesting age of information now. Everyone is thinking about how they're going to deal with AI, because there's so much information, an overload of information.
Absolutely.
But there's a big difference between information and wisdom. And I like to think all of the mistakes that I've made, all the rabbit holes I've fallen into, the scars that I wear in business, I'd like to think that if I can get through to people to help them understand what I've done, they won't do that themselves. Even if they hear about 10 of my misfortunes, they think, I better not do that. Don't over leverage, or don't trust the bank in that way. I will be happy that I've, that a bit of that's got through on Morse code, so that people don't make the same mistakes that I've made and fall into the same holes that I've fallen into.
Sure. But, there's another really big takeaway for me as well, that the perspective of you failed repeatedly and you're still here and you're still winning and you're still succeeding and you're still doing things. And it's the fear of failure for a lot of people that stops them even starting in the first place.
Well, what is failure? Because when I was at school, someone sent me home with a violin because I decided I'd quite like to learn the violin. And after about 2 weeks of squawking through Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, I realised I didn't want to play the violin. My parents certainly didn't want me to learn to play the violin. And then you learn a different instrument, a piano or a guitar. But I don't think you fail. You're just experimenting with things. Same with sport. I'll try tennis, I'll try cricket, I'll try rugby, I might try rowing. It's not about failure. Yeah. You're just sort of experimenting to find out what you like and what you're good at. And I think actually the Americans, one thing they are good at is they don't get too upset about failure. They dust themselves down and just kind of get on with life. Whereas I think we put some failure in a box. But I've always learned a lot more from pain than pleasure.
100%. Yeah.
If you put the hand in the fire and you burn your fingers, you tend not to do it again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there's also, I think, it's not bad to have an attitude of, try lots of stuff and keep what works. And then when you do find something that works, then go all in. Then's the time to bet heavily, because the odds are in your favour and you've kind of worked out things are good.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And I think you're right. Failure is a loaded word in this country, very much so. The Americans will preach quite often, fail often, fail fast, because I don't think they have the same connotation of the word as failure. But over here, we tend to, failure is negative. It's you don't want to fail. Actually, as you've reframed it, it's learning, it's practice, experimenting. And you have to experiment, because otherwise you will never get to what really works. So it should be encouraged more, but it isn't really encouraged in this country.
It's not really. But I think it depends how you frame your own experiences. How many people gave up smoking on their first attempt? Very, very few.
Yep.
It might take some people 6 or 7 attempts to get rid of their cigarettes or their vaping. They just found another way of it not working, if you could frame it like that. But most people, get there in the end. They're going to realise, actually, it's not particularly great for you. In 2026, it's not great. And so they get there in the end. But it takes a few failures for them to win.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's very, very true. And something that you said sort of resonated with me a lot there was you were talking about your past experiences, and you said that you don't know why you did go down that avenue of the restaurant side. What do you think drove that? Do you think it was a case of, I've succeeded once, I'm invincible, I can do this? Or was it more a case of, because you hadn't had the downside yet, in business that it just didn't seem like it would ever come?
I think that there's a little bit of overconfidence that comes when you gain success, and when you're successful young too. You sort of start to believe your own PR. And I thought, because I was a successful entrepreneur, I could just turn that on to any industry. And there certainly was an opportunity with this restaurant group. If somebody had grabbed hold of it, who knew what they were doing, understood about margins, and it was all fish restaurant as well, and price of fish goes up and down all the time. Very difficult. And by the time you printed the menu, the auction prices have changed. And so, again, the wisdom from that is stick to what you know, because probably you know quite a lot about what you're doing. I spend some time in Dubai now, and I'd still be very cautious about going into business there because I'm a newbie.
Sure.
You know, there are other people that could take advantage of me because they know the ropes.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't. So I would still say, you know, be cautious about trying something new.
It's interesting you brought up Dubai. This is purely, you know, where we are in 2026. And, you know, I don't like to get too political about things on the show, but it's just a general question from your perspective in terms of how you see things. If things stayed the way they are, do you see that more and more wealth will leave the country, and that maybe the opportunities that were once here to start and build your wealth probably wouldn't exist? Or how do you see that?
I love Britain. I love the country of my birth, but I think we are forcing a lot of people away, and in some ways the lunatics have taken over the asylum. And I think a millionaire is leaving Britain every 45 minutes, I read. So since you and I started talking, somebody else has got on a plane and left.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we should punish the wealth creators, because 1% of the highest paid people pay 30% of the tax. And if they go, who's going to pay that tax to build hospitals and schools and prisons? It's easy to just knock the wealthy. But actually, beyond being wealthy, you know, people are creating jobs, they're helping people's careers, they're paying more and more tax, you know, national insurance and PAYE and corporation tax. And if you knock them and bash them, or you make it so difficult to employ people or too expensive to employ people, they will go and work their magic and sprinkle their pixie dust somewhere else. And I think that's been one of the big reasons that people are going abroad. And, you know, there are crime rates going up, free speech is under attack. Britain is a more difficult place to live in and do business in than it was. And I hope that the pendulum swings back, because we need businesses and we need wealth. We're not the enemy.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at the philanthropic work that UK wealthy people do, they give billions away and put billions back into the community. You know, we're not the devil.
Yeah.
But it seems that we are a target. Oh, we've run out of money, let's go and tax some more wealthy people. And I suspect it might get, you know, worse before it gets better.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it definitely the pendulum needs to swing back. It is out of kilter at the moment, and things are not looking great in terms of, if you ask yourself the question, why would a company come here to set up at this moment in time? Well, if they have choices, they probably wouldn't, because it's not favourable right now.
Do you know, I was listening to the news on the way in. There's another company delisting from the stock market. I think Mighty are being taken over by a private equity fund. Yeah. Our stock market's in collapse. You know, we were the financial capital of the world, and at one time, I think we're losing our prowess, and it's such a shame.
It is. It really, really is. I mean, you know, I'm nearly 50, and in my lifetime, I've seen quite a powerful nation, quite a influential nation become a fraction of what it once was, and in every capacity. I think it still has the possibility to be great again. It hasn't gone so far that it can't come back, but things do need to change.
I think it is on the precipice, actually.
It's close, isn't it?
We've got a new Prime Minister this morning, and let's hope he does a great job. This isn't a knock, by the way, for me on any government, so I'm not anti any party. I'm just pro-business.
Yeah.
But does Andy Burnham run the country, or do the people that control the debt run the country? Who owns the debt? So the central banks? Do the central banks run the country? Because without borrowing, their hands are tied behind their back. So I think we are at quite a precarious time, especially since AI is likely to take away quite a few jobs. We're starting to see it in some of the white collar industries. And we haven't even got to the stage yet where some friendly little robots come along to take away the blue collar jobs.
Yeah.
And even if there's a 10 or 15% more unemployment, which would be an enormous amount of people, I don't know how we would fund that. I think a lot of Western economies might collapse if that's the case. So I think we are in a precarious time. I'm not trying to catastrophize, but I think we need to be aware of what's coming down the line.
If you said, and again, you're not catastrophizing, you're not making sort of crystal ball predictions, but if things didn't change, if they didn't go back quite rapidly to the right direction, should we say, where do you see this country from a wealth perspective in 10 years' time? Does it look like a westernized country?
Yes, I am actually hopeful in the long term, but I think we've probably got a decade of challenges and difficulties as we get used to working with AI. And I think there will be, a catalogue of people having to change the way they live and change what they do. But I think going beyond that, I think we'll be all right.
Message of hope.
But I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
And it's, people survive. People survived the Second World War, but it wasn't very nice.
Yeah.
And I think we will, there are going to be some challenging times ahead.
Agreed. And that's something that, again, one of the big reasons for doing this show is that a lot of people these days have quite a sort of, I wouldn't say go as far to say as nihilistic view, but almost quite apathetic. What's the point in trying to build wealth? What's the point in trying to do this? Because there doesn't seem to be much there anymore. I can't see that bright future. I can't hold it in my hands. And this too shall pass. It's just a phase, right? The world will keep spinning. Life will continue.
It's interesting, isn't it? I was reading a post by Elon Musk the other day saying he thinks it's probably more likely than not likely that we're all living in a simulation. So we're not living in the world at all. We're all in a game. Well, if we are, does it really matter? Would that change the way you do things? Would it change the way you look after your family? Would it change the way you look after your community? Or would you strive to do the same things?
Yeah.
And I think we just strive to do the same things. So, I think there's a big part of human nature that's good, and there's another part of human nature that's not great. As we saw after the football final the other day when people are fighting, no one stole their children; they just lost a football game.
Exactly. Yeah, put it in some perspective, right? It's just it's a ball on a pitch. That's what it is.
Bag of air.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe robotics. There are some theories. But yeah, so I think it's important that people put things into perspective, and that's why. I think in 2026, the way I see it, most people, regardless of background these days, have more opportunity to create wealth, real wealth, quicker, not easier, but quicker, and probably more simply than any time ever before in history. Would you agree with that? Yes,
I think that's right. But I don't think our schools are teaching people to have those skills at the moment.
Sure.
I wish a teacher at a school would teach someone how to write a good prompt, a good AI prompt, rather than, talking about the, how much coal is on the, strata in geography.
Yeah.
And I wish that somebody at school would teach our young children about debt and credit cards and, so they wouldn't be seduced by these, 0% offers from credit card companies that suddenly turn into 3% a month after the first year, when the kids have got into hock.
And health and relationships and self-worth and all of these lessons, rather than, as you say, things that actually don't make a blind bit of difference once you leave those four walls.
Correct. Absolutely. And because we've got the information, we've learned so much. We need to be giving that wisdom to the next generation. You know, so many things about health, you know, whether you believe everything David Sinclair says or not, but we do seem to be on the brink of curing a lot of illnesses and helping people live 10 years longer if they know what to do. You know, it won't be just taking a pill and, you know, carrying on smoking your cigars and drinking 2 bottles of claret every night.
Exactly. There's things that you can do, but things we can all do. And as you say, we have more information now than we've ever had. Sometimes that's debilitating, I think, because there's too much information. And sometimes there's misinformation, isn't there, as well?
It's interesting what you said, and you've provoked a thought in me, which is I spend my life teaching, you know, wealth creation and talk about compounding, you know, the whole thing about you only have to double £1,000 10 times to make $1 million. You only have to double £10,000 10 times to make 10 million. That's 10 good decisions in your life. How hard can that be compared to the 20,000 decisions you're going to make every day about what coffee to drink, what to wear, whether to go up the escalator? But actually, health compounds in the same way. So if in your earlier life you put in half an hour at the gym 3 times a week and get some good sleep and hydrate, those effects compound. So 30 years later, you're seeing quite a dramatic effect, just as you would if you were compounding money.
Absolutely. Yeah. The dividends you collect in later life are what you put in the bank earlier on. And in terms of the decisions you're talking about, the 10 times, talk us through that process on a wealth perspective. Because there'll be a lot of people here listening and watching this thinking, okay, you've got my attention. I've got £1,000 or access to. How do I do that? What do I actually do?
Well, I didn't make this stuff up. I mean, people have been doing this for thousands of years.
Sure.
The wealth creators, the robber barons of America, the JP Morgans, you know, they've all been doing this. But I mean, it's only maths, isn't it? If you double £10,000 10 times, you'll make 10 million.
Yep.
And there are things that you can do to help yourself. So if you bought a house, for example, you might have to wait a long time, 20 years, for it to double in value. But if you got a 75% mortgage on that house, it'd only have to go up 25% for your stake, your deposit, to double. And in this country at the moment, there's no tax on your personal private residence, assuming you live in it, and it really is your personal private residence. So, you know, that's one way of doubling your stake. And you know, if you were prepared to put a new kitchen in and you bought it correctly and you know, do it up a bit, you might be able to do that in 2 or 3 years. You just need to do that 10 times. So debt, understanding debt is quite important, and the difference between good debt and bad debt.
What mistakes do they make about debt, or what do they not understand about good debt?
Well, it's the same
I think
word.
Everyone's got bad debt in terms of...
It's the same word, debt, isn't it? So, you know, if you're buying a holiday on your credit card or a round of cocktails, and by the time the credit card bill comes, you can't remember what cocktails you ordered. Or even buying a car on credit. You're buying things, you're using debt to buy things that are going to go down in value. That's bad debt. But if you're using debt and not over-leveraging yourself to buy things that are likely to go up in value, it might be a small business that you see that you can improve, or the owner's tired, fatigued, lazy, whatever reason, or you see a house that you think you can improve, then I don't think we should be ashamed of borrowing money to do that. It's just understanding debt and looking at I often ask, well, what's the worst that can happen? You know, if you've got a house and you've rented it out and the mortgage rate goes up a bit, can you still afford to service the mortgage? And if you do all those calculations correctly, tax is another important thing. There's one calculation I did was, if you double £10,000 10 times, I said you get to 100 million. But if you paid 24% tax every time you doubled, in this country at the moment, it's about the going tax rate for a lot of countries. Instead of having 100 million, you'd only have 37 million. You'd have left 63 million on the table. So the whole structuring thing, without getting too boring about it, no one likes to talk about tax, it's really dull. But actually setting up a business with the correct structure is boring, but it's really important.
Yeah. And this is the thing that some people miss. When people are structuring their tax, they're not doing it and stealing from other people. As in, the misconception seems to be, if someone over here has a lot of wealth or builds up a lot of wealth, they're now avoiding tax, but unlike this person here who's paying full whack, and it's not quite as black and white as that, is it? It's not as cut and dry as that.
It's not, because people that find a way of finding financial freedom for life, and I would urge anybody to try and find financial freedom for life for themselves and their family. Often those people are spending money too. Every time you spend money, there's VAT on what you're spending. They're paying taxes. Often they're employing people. They're creating jobs. They're creating business. They're creating pride. They're creating a sense of purpose for tens or hundreds or thousands of people. There's a lot of good that comes with that. But we do tend to like to try and punish. Envy is a terrible thing. And often people are envious of people that have done well. Especially people that flaunt their wealth.
Yeah. I think
no one likes their face rubbed in it.
Yes, and I think in times of austerity, that sort of magnifies, doesn't it?
And also, I think that there is, unfortunately, a much bigger barrier now, a much bigger divide between poverty and real richness. And when I was growing up, the middle class was a kind of good place to end up.
Sure.
You'd have a good life if you could get to. My parents were both working class, and they were trying to get us into that middle class and buy a middle class house in a middle class neighbourhood, and that was great. But now I think that middle class is sort of disappearing, really, and we've got a lot of people that are really struggling, and then a lot of uber wealthy people, and we do need to find a way of some sort of redistribution if we can. But I think the way to do that is to embrace the wealth creators and tax them fairly, and they'll give back.
Yeah.
We've already talked about philanthropy, but they'll give back in terms of setting up businesses and paying more and more tax.
Yeah, and obviously give them the incentive to be here in the first place and actually have the business.
Yes, and there needs to be safety. We talked about earlier in the conversation about my daughter being born. When you have a new person coming into the world, you think, well, what kind of world are we bringing her into, and where would we like to send her to school, and what's the crime rate like, and should we go somewhere else where there isn't a high crime rate, where there's less chance of her being attacked or abused in any way, and I think we need to make sure that we have a country that is safe and fair and equitable.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just doesn't quite feel like that at the moment.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't feel like the country that I grew up in terms of from a opportunity and safety perspective that it once did. It very much feels like a more volatile world outside the doorstep at the moment.
Does a bit.
Yeah, and it is definitely a question for anyone with children, I think. Is this the world, or is this the location that I think that they should be raised in right now?
And I think we need to also have a society that rewards people that contribute. And they could contribute in business, they could contribute in their community, because it seems that we have a lot of people that contribute, but we also have some people that are takers.
Sure.
And if you make it easier for people to take from the economy rather than contribute to it, then you're encouraging the wrong sort of behaviour. And I think that people contribute to it, have less mental health issues, and they feel a sense of pride. And we should be, encouraging. I think we should encourage anybody. We should let anybody into the country who's prepared to contribute and give something. That'd be a great thing.
Yeah, and it's a really important lesson that you touched on there, is that when you go full out in life and you try and build things, and it's not just about the getting of the things, whether it's the money, whether it's the prestige or whatever it is. As you said, it's the journey along the way. It's you becoming who you can be. And that feels phenomenal. That is fantastic. That voyage of self-discovery and the people that you meet along the way and all those experiences. If you sit there and just allow things to happen, just take without giving and without growing, you lose all that. You don't experience that part of life.
You don't, and I think there's something again about risk taking that comes in there. And if you just hear me to tell you a quick story,
sure.
A few years ago, I had some American friends that came over for Christmas, and one of them said, "Oh, I want to go to a carol service on Christmas Eve." And, "Oh, really? Oh, can we have to do that?" Anyway, we popped along to St. Peter's Church, and there was a sermon, and the vicar said, "We've done a survey here of people that were over 100 years of age. to ask them what they regret. And I thought, oh, this is a bit interesting now. And I'm sort of remembering it because I'm telling you about it. And they'd ask these 100, there's not much going on after 100, is there? But they asked these people what their regrets were and what they would have done differently. And the overall number one thing was they wish they'd been a bit more adventurous. They wish they'd been a bit more courageous. They wish they'd started that business. They wish they'd moved to Australia. They wish they'd asked that boy for a date or a girl for a date. And I think that resonated with me because you don't want to be old with a blanket over your knees thinking, oh, I wish I'd tried that. Oh, I wish I'd had my time again. And now's the time to do it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I've learned being in business is they're not all very clever, great people. Anyone can do it, really. I think a lot of people are waiting for the next great idea, whereas actually it's not about the idea. It's all about the execution. It's just doing something well.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you're a plumber or an entrepreneur. Just turn up on time, do a great job, and you'll do well.
Yeah. That's really good advice. In terms of that side of things, we do have a lot of opportunities in 2026. We do have a lot of technology. You're on social media doing very well in there. Do you embrace that, or do you outsource that and say it's not my lane? I'm going to stick to what I know and what I do.
No, I'm fascinated by it. I've only been using social media really for the last 3 or 4 months, so it's all very new to me. But what I've found and what I've learned is in a world of fakeness, really, where all photos can be doctored, I value authenticity of people. And in a funny kind of way, I think authenticity is the new uniqueness. So if I'm recording if I'm having a rant about something, it will be me, it's authentic, but they might like it or might not. And so far it seems to have gone all right. Now, I may say something next week that's awful and gets me cancelled.
It's always there. It's always the possibility.
It's always around the corner. But I think it is about authenticity. You just got to say what you really believe in and hold as true. And certainly so far, but it's early days. So far, that's worked for me.
What advice would you give to someone if they were listening to this and thinking, I very much am already, I understand I need to build financial freedom. I want it. I want the option. I want the optionality. I want the adventure that it might bring to get it. But where do I start? I'm maybe leaving education, or I'm in my first or second job. I'm not happy, and I'm just not sure. I'm overwhelmed in what to do. What would be your best advice to them?
I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed because they think it's an all or nothing thing. And I don't think starting a business is an all or nothing thing. And I think a lot of great companies were started as a sort of side hustle where people didn't give up their day jobs. They did work hard. So they were working for somebody else, doing their 40 hours a week, doing their 9 to 5. But in the evenings and at weekends, they were working 5 till 9. They were working on their side hustle. Phil Knight from Nike did that. I think Amazon did that as well. Jeff was running that business from his garage for a while, selling books. A lot of people set up businesses as a side hustle, and then when they've got a little bit of gravitas and a little bit of momentum, then they can let their day job go. So it doesn't have to be this grand gesture where you kind of risk everything and dive into the cold water, hoping it's going to be all right. It can be a gentle start, but I would urge people to have a go. In my experience, nearly everyone can do it. I mean, not everyone can do it, but if you've got some drive and you're prepared to work hard, there isn't much work-life balance for the first couple of years. First 3 or 4 years even, you see people that own their own businesses on taking 10 holidays a year and whatever. That's a fantasy, really. That might happen later on when you're successful, but it is a grind, it's a graft. It's boring.
Yeah. And is that the part of social media where it's not really showing you the reality when you see people, like, as you say, 10th holiday this year, just started this year, and you think, more experienced people like yourself will look at that and go, that's not true. That's not reality.
I watched a reel day before yesterday where some bloke had this Lamborghini, and you could see the rental company's sticker in the window. It's not real.
That's great, isn't it?
He's rented it for an hour during someone's lunch break.
Yeah.
No, it's very hard to live up. No one can live up to a fake reality, can they?
This is it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which I think we come back to, let's work out what's enough for us, and be happy with that and settle for that.
And how does someone do that, do you think, if they're sitting down today for the first time going, all right, I want to do this. How do I start to especially considering, sort of cost of living keeps going up and everything else, where is my enough? Where do I aim for? What am I looking to be able to cover and then some, and still live the life I want to live?
That's such a different question, because everyone's different and everyone has different skills.
Sure.
and start from different areas. And also, when you're successful, you do raise your expectations, or when you realize that you're good at something, you tend to, it doesn't matter whether it's business or whether it's sport. Oh, I can run fast. Oh, I can get in the national team. Oh, I might be able to go to the Commonwealth Games. Oh, I might be able to go to the Olympics. It's not a bad thing to be ambitious. I think it's just a bad thing to be so ambitious that you're not enjoying that ambition.
Yeah.
It's so difficult, I think, to give generic advice. I think you can say, stick to what you know and what you really enjoy and what you love, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with yourself. Don't do something that you really don't enjoy. Spending your life doing something you hate, that would be awful. And I would say, do something that you know really well, or that you're prepared to learn an awful lot about.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of people. I've always liked to work on these smaller niches. I've never run huge businesses with thousands of people. I've run businesses with hundreds of people, 600 or 700 people.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to find a niche that's just an inch wide and a mile deep, because it's much easier to be a trusted source of knowledge about that small micro niche, or even the irresistible first choice in that small micro niche. So if you have a business that just, I'm making it up now, cleans pushchairs, then they know all there is about how to mend pushchairs and clean them and give them back to you the next day without any sick on them.
Yeah.
Choose a niche and exploit it and be the best that you can be in that niche. That would be my advice. Now, you're never going to be Apple or Google, but I think you'll make a great living and be proud of what you do.
Absolutely. And if anyone's listening to that, obviously Gary has a young daughter. He's telling you the business to get into.
Yeah. I can't see the financial model in that one, actually, but
would you err into the camp of dream big or dream bigger, but still have more realistic views? Where would you be more in, do you think, if you were talking to people?
I think experience tells me that successful businesses aim high. Successful people aim high, and successful businesses aim high. And when I started studying, and I spent 2 years studying what makes businesses successful. And it didn't seem to matter. I can tell you now, they tended to fall into three camps. The first camp was they had a monopoly. At the time we studied British Telecom. Well, British Telecom were everywhere. The second part of successful businesses were ones that innovated something magical. Like they invented super glue or the new mobile phone. Now, that's hard to do as well. But the third group of successful businesses, the one thing they had in common was they aimed high. They set these huge, hairy goals. I think it's in that book, Good to Great, actually, where they talk about setting big, hairy, audacious goals.
Yeah.
I think you need sometimes to set goals that make you suck in and think, wow, can I really achieve that? And then sometimes, you'll aim for the stars and you'll only get to the moon, but the moon's good enough.
I was going to say, and is that the important part? Because obviously if you aim averagely or mediocre, realistically, you're probably not going to hit it, and then you're going to hit low goals.
I think we always, just occasionally in life, we run into people that are kind of a complete monomaniac with a mission.
Yeah.
You know, a 9-year-old little girl who says, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up.
Yeah, of course.
And 2 years later, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. Yeah. And they're so focused, they will be a doctor when they grow up.
Yeah.
And why not? You know, and I think it does take that tenacity and determination sometimes. And it pays off. Sure, yeah, encourage it. Go for it.
Absolutely.
As long as it doesn't ruin your life along the way.
Well, what a journey anyway. There'll be things that you learn and there'll be people that you meet, and the journey's why you do it in the first place, for sure.
That's true. But you don't want to be pushed too far. It's interesting that we saw Wimbledon recently, and you see going back some of those child prodigies that their bodies are going to rack with pain now because they've been pushed too hard as kids, you know, to hit 10,000 balls a day. I think Agassi was hitting, you know. His father was his coach. Yeah, you don't want to hothouse your children quite that much. But if they've got a passion, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Bob Proctor once said, someone asked him, could I be, you know, like the next Usain Bolt or whatever? He said, I believe that if you wanted to be, you have the capacity to, but not everyone has the capacity to do things they don't want to do.
No, they don't, but they do have extraordinary capacity for change. I have a friend, Melody, who lives in Switzerland, and she's a photographer, and she was doing a project with an underwater diver. You know, these free divers, these mad people that hold their breath for a long time and go down and come up, some don't come back up again. And as part of the process, she was filming them underwater. She started to learn to hold her breath, and she couldn't hold her breath for more than a minute when she started. But by the end of the program, I think it was 3-month program, she could hold her breath for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite an extraordinary change to a human.
Yeah.
So no, we might not be able to be Usain Bolt. We can certainly change quite a lot of how we are.
Absolutely.
And that should give us all hope, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I think the world record now sits at something stupid like 35 minutes.
Really?
35 minutes.
Really? That's astonishing, isn't it?
Exactly that. It's completely astonishing. And they are the equivalent of the very much the exception, not the rule. Most people will be able to adapt and probably go from seconds to minutes to maybe 5 or 6 minutes and, you know, kind of hit capacity. 35 minutes.
Your body must be shut down completely. That's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, you've got to enter into a completely different state, I would imagine, because there's so many things that need to happen.
And your brain must be so calm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing. There's another podcast. Great.
Absolutely.
Can I come on that one, please?
Yeah, of course.
Love to hear that one.
Learn how to do that. But yeah, exactly. So everyone has the capacity for change and the capability to do it. They just need to have the want and the drive.
We do.
And the vision.
We can't all be Usain Bolt, but we can be a lot different than we are now if we choose to be and prepared to put in the grind.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic.
And that leaves us with great amount of hope, I think.
I think so. Regardless of how things may seem in the outside world, you've always got the ability to get up and make a difference that day, which leads to a brighter day and a brighter day and a brighter day and so on and so forth. And so we should never take away that these things that are happening outside control everything we do.
That sounds so hippy-dippy and I'm out to leave. No, you're right. We can make a difference and we should.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we can.
We can.
And if you can, you should. And if you should, do it. Because if everyone makes that little bit of difference, that little degree of hope and brings it into their life and that ripple effect, imagine what a better world we'd live in.
We would and we should.
I agree. Quick fire question for you before we wrap up on there. If you were starting out again today, completely from scratch, now obviously I'm not expecting you to know what you don't know, but from your experience, what do you think would be an area you would start in today and why?
When I'm thinking about starting businesses up, it's not just about how profitable the business is going to be. It's about what multiple I could sell it for.
Okay.
Because if you're going to work hard and risk your money and your time and your capital and your reputation setting up a business, you want one that's going to be able to build quickly. But also, if you can build one that sells for 9 times its profits, rather than 3 times its profits, you need to sort of think about that too. And I think a lot of the creative industries and a lot of education, a lot of AI now, a lot of online things are businesses that command great multiples. They are businesses that you can run from any country online. And I think that agility and that flexibility is something that I would certainly look for. I went to an engagement party 2 weeks ago in Norfolk, and it was a farming community. If you've got 800 acres or 8,000 acres, you can't move that business anywhere, can you, really?
Yeah.
You're stuck with it, and you're stuck with the taxes or whatever laws the country throws at you. So I think I would start to try and do something that was agile, that I could scale quickly. And there aren't many business books written about cunning. I don't mean cunning in a bad way, where you're taking advantage of other people, but you are able to walk through the legs of giants. I would try and choose something that you can scale quickly and agilely build and change direction if you need to.
Yeah.
And the one thing that the new creative economy has taught us is you can get big quite quickly, and you can scale quite quickly if you're doing the right things and you become well known quite quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good lesson for us all. That's where I'd be aiming.
Excellent. That's really good advice. And in terms of if you were starting out from scratch, maybe you didn't have much money behind you, would you leverage other people's money? Would you go down the debt route, or what would you do if you were starting out again?
I think they're questions for when you're a bit more grown up. I think it's really hard to raise capital to start up businesses in untried areas. And I think you've got to beg, steal or borrow from your friends and family. Really, you've got to ask, the wealthy aunt if you can have a little bit of your inheritance now, please. Grandma or whoever it is, auntie. It's so hard to raise capital, and it's so hard to raise even bank debt for an unproven idea, for an unprofitable business. There are some funding pages that might help you. I always think a little bit of leverage makes things easier. But you need to get your business to a certain size, and it needs to be a profitable business before anyone will even consider lending you money. But I have a rule, whereas I wouldn't borrow more than, I have a sweet spot, which I think is leveraging up 66%. I wouldn't borrow any money than that. You can borrow 10 times your stake. There are some crypto exchanges that will lend you 100 times your stake.
Yeah.
But if you go make a cup of tea, you might find that the asset that you've bought has gone down such a little bit, but it's completely stopped you out and you've lost everything. Yeah. So I think you have to be careful with borrowing, which is why I talk about this 66% sweet spot. Don't borrow more than 2/3. But those questions are only for when your business is a bit more established. The sad truth is you kind of got to fund it yourself with friends and family, or a partner, perhaps. I've often enjoyed working with business partners. I set up my first business with a partner because he sort of gave me permission to do it, really. We were two together rather than one alone. Yeah. And we had different skill sets too, which, of course, is helpful. So I wouldn't rule that out.
Yeah, that's great advice. And if you were someone who is maybe, sort of my age, maybe sort of in the 40s, 50s, that sort of area, maybe you're looking at the horizon and thinking, I feel like there's probably more of a safety net to have in retirement. From an investment perspective in 2026, where would you be looking at this stage?
Again, I think it's difficult because money in the bank, just, inflation will chivvy away and bite it away, won't it?
Yeah, of course.
But I think there are still plenty of safe assets that you can buy. It's generally not difficult to buy undervalued property. A lot of people want to buy the shiny new finished development. There's no profit in that, none at all. But if you can generally find an unloved flat or a house or a caravan and rent it out. Now, there are tax implications that you'll be paying tax on the rent that comes in. But again, think about structure. In commercial property, you might find a tired building that you can change from commercial to residential. Perhaps it was residential in the first place, changed to commercial, and then it's come back to residential. I think they're the safest bets, really, because you've got underlying bricks and mortar to protect yourself. Even if you muck it up, you can't lose too much. And along the way, it's generally giving you an income if you rent it out. I think that's the most straightforward thing to do if you're slightly older.
Yeah, gives you that sort of forgiving layer, I guess.
Yeah, but again, if you're using leverage, an asset might only have to go up 25% for you to double your stake.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a retired geography teacher, it's a great thing to do. And then you can fund your grandchildren's education, perhaps.
Yeah, fantastic. What about the sort of current trend? I think it's pretty much American-led, but I've seen it coming over here now of the advice of buying up sort of what they call mum and pop businesses, sort of unsexy, boring businesses that are maybe a generation is retiring out of, and being able to buy those. And these are a great idea because, they've got proven business history, but they can probably be more profitable if they were, say, digitized, or if they were brought online into a more modern era.
I think you've answered the question yourself. I think they're a great idea because a lot of people get A, fatigued, and B, stuck in their own ways. And we all know businesses, corner shops, or in any high street, there are a lot of tired businesses. And if you've already got an existing profit stream, sometimes it's much easier to improve those businesses, and you can do it quite quickly, really. You might cut your costs, you might increase your prices, you might improve the product lines, you might have an online presence, just some fresh thinking. When I look at what private equity do, they tend to only want to be in businesses for 3 or 4 or 5 years and then get out and do it again. Whereas a lot of family businesses have been going for generations. I spoke to a guy in South Africa last night who's feeling the burden of having to run his family's businesses, and a lot of them aren't profitable at all. I'm sure with a fresh set of eyes, some of those businesses could be much better and much more profitable much more quickly. Yeah. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. So anyone who's watching this today or listening to this today, where can they go to find out more about your world, about your books, about your perspectives?
So you can find me, you can track me down on garyashworth.com. I'm easy to find. Don't buy my new book, Double Up Money Mastery. Download the free audio version and listen to it in the gym. I don't need the money. Download the free audio version. And there will be some tips for free in there. The whole book's in there. I've narrated it, so it's me. It's authentic, but it's not James Mason's voice booming out. But there will be some tips in there that I'm hoping will be helpful. I do one-to-one calls on my website if you need me, and I do some one-to-one coaching as well. So I'm easy to find, but I just want to give younger people permission to be great and permission to find financial security for life. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, and it's a great sense of achievement once you've done it. It's really worthwhile.
Amazing. Any last thoughts to leave us with today?
No, I think you've covered most things. The one thing that has not disturbed me a bit recently, I did read a book called The Second Coming, The Coming Wave, about AI, and the 3 things I left with were: it's not controllable, it's not predictable, and you can't really regulate it. So I think we do need to understand what's coming down the wire and be able to adapt to the change that we're facing. And that advice goes as much for me or you as for anybody else. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be as big as inventing the wheel or fire or something like that. I think there's going to be a lot of change. Yeah, no, I agree. The implications are huge, and we don't know what we don't know. It's constantly evolving. It's self-evolving. So and unpredictable. Yeah, completely unpredictable. We have no idea what it might look like. And if you look at the last 2 years, I don't know if you remember, but when OpenAI first sort of opened its doors and said you can now type some things into a chat, and everyone was like, oh, try this. And then you saw the first pictures that people generated, the first videos, and there was like pictures of like Will Smith with like 15 fingers and all this sort of stuff, and like elongated faces. And now every day, if you look on Instagram, probably 1 in every 4 or 5 videos you see are completely AI generated. They are, but I think people are asking now about the ethical base of
Agreed,
AI.
yeah.
So, Anthropic wouldn't open the books up how much the US government paid them. Sam Altman did.
Yeah.
And some people are saying, look, I'm not going to use ChatGPT anymore because they're not ethical.
Yeah.
And I think even if you're one person with not much power, you can say, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to support that. And I think we need to get a bit more ethical about our AI interaction. And so we can all do something, write to somebody or choose to use a different model.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Very, very powerful as well. If we all did that, make a big difference.
It would.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would.
Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure to have you. And I think hopefully everyone at home will be itching to get your audio download. I know I will be listening to it in the gym.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been really interesting. You're good at this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a genuine pleasure to talk to you, and I could talk to you all day. So.
And you too.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening today. If you've enjoyed this episode, which I hope you have, please make sure you hit follow or subscribe. That means that you'll never miss the latest conversations on health, wealth, and relationships, all designed to help you live longer and love the life that you're building along the way. We've got some incredible guests coming up and some powerful conversations, and I'd love to have you with us for them. So don't forget to hit follow and subscribe. And if you got value from this episode, which I hope you did, please share it with someone you care about. That means that they get the chance to hear something that could genuinely improve their health, their relationships, or their future immeasurably. And these conversations grow because people like you actually pass them on. That helps us to keep bringing them to more people who really need to hear them. And if you want to join the biggest lessons, tools, and practical takeaways from these conversations each week, join my weekly longevity playbook. That means that you're going to get useful insights on health, wealth, and relationships, broken down into simple actions you can actually use in real life. No fluff, no overwhelm, just better ideas and better decisions over time. The link's in the description. You can sign up today. And if you've enjoyed the show, which I really hope you have, I'd really appreciate you leaving a review. That means it helps more people discover these conversations and helps the show to grow. And I personally read every single one of the reviews. A lot of your suggestions for guests and topics and questions genuinely shape where we go next. So if there's something you'd love covered, please leave it in the review section and I'll get to see it myself.